Okay, so this episode is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to try, as an atheist, imagining humanity's origin story and explaining how we got here as if, I had a religious explanation. So I'm going to be putting aside any sort of, anti-theist arguments here, and I'm going to imagine what it would be like if I crafted some sort of god and religious explanation for basically all that we know and all of the problems of the world and that sort of fun stuff. So it's like a faux divine design, that that I'm trying to concoct here. It's a bit of an essay. I've written down these notes. I'm gonna go through them point by point. So I will briefly elaborate on what my religion's human origin story might look like if I believed in God and had a religion and all that stuff. So in short, it would go something like this. God was waiting for a time when the world was ready to be given a different kind of existence, a life lived without violence. And it's one of those things that sounds pure, like a utopian situation, and a lot of human society rejects that, as we know. So we apparently had fallen at some point, or fallen off, I suppose the modern person might say. And it does remind me of how after September 11th, 2001, the editors of the magazine First Things asserted that, quote, those who in principle oppose the use of military force have no legitimate part in the discussion about how military force should be used. So when you have sort of sentimental values like a utopia, it really clashes with that kind of language that supposedly religious society like the United States was bandying about. We keep on hearing that Jesus was like a peacemaker and stuff like that. And when it comes to his followers, they end up being pretty much anything but that. But anyway, my original origin story about the human race would be that we indeed lived in a world without violence, but something came along and changed it. So early on, this hypothetical God gave mankind the task of setting up a perfect and just society where all individuals are provided equal rights and equal opportunities and all that stuff. So the question, what is justice, would have seemed alien and strange in such a society, as they already understood perfect justice. It would have been like it would have been like asking pre-modern society about a spaceship taking off. It would have sounded a little too fantastical, I guess. Only it might have been more absurd than that because, it would have been something that they might not have even been able to imagine at first. Then, God told humanity that they should live together in peace as a single world, sharing and caring for one another. You can just hear that sitcom audience go, like we're all in love and everything. And really, that's not too different, though, from a lot of language that you would hear in the Bible. For example, I looked into this. There's a passage called Romans 12:18 that says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peacefully with all. So, that's really not far from what I'm saying here. It's basically the same concept. So, this basic idea would have been God's only rule for humanity. And presumably they could live eternally with that rule, or for as long as humans would live in this hypothetical universe. And there would be no need to rule over each other or nature. And, it's quite unlike what they say in Genesis, I suppose, where they said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So, that type of language, I guess, it it might not really apply to this situation because there was no teaching about ruling over creatures. It was just, share stuff, basically. And really, if you think about that Genesis passage, that was really there to sort of rationalize and justify, hunting and farming practices, for better or worse. I'm not really going to bother getting into whether or not, that sort of stuff is valid. I'm just saying that's the context to that, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, as long as each person followed his or her part of the basic moral code of, living together in peace and sharing and caring, then no evil would happen. And the problem with that, though, is that it's sort of a feebly set up world, right? That premise is pretty easy. That set of dominoes is easy to knock down. And what do you know? That's what would have happened at some point in my little origin story. When one person or group broke this rule, other people could do almost nothing to help the group that was harmed. And, one of the little problems is that God, in wanting to create a perfect universe or whatever, let's just assume that he made it so that most people derived pleasure from their pursuits, whatever those pursuits were, or they were capable of deriving pleasure from them. So that means if they discovered how to inflict harm, well, even though it was a harmful thing, they didn't know that it was harmful necessarily, or maybe they thought it was a legitimate thing because it felt good, and really observable reality would not provide adequate answers for this newfound ability to inflict harm and derive pleasure from it. And it's not necessarily that the God or the creative force had intended for people to become sadistic, but because they had the ability to derive pleasure from a great many things, this was also something they could do and, feel pleasure from. They could hurt people, all the good old-fashioned stuff like murder and, all those bad things like stealing, basically all the major sins, lying, what have you. And, the code was too simple to solve all of the problems that emerged whenever somebody was newly inspired to break the simple rule. And because it felt good and right to sometimes break these rules or bend them, people started to create their own special codes or exceptions to the rule. And they seemed practical and just because reality itself was revealed to have sort of an open door. If you open that door a little bit, why not open it a little bit wider? And, you'll discover a whole new world of possible invention. And if some people get harmed along the way, maybe that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Maybe that's God's will. And, you can have new religious explanations, new teachings, new this, new that. Just a bunch of rationalizations. So although all of humanity was already unified by the rule at first, once broken and new beliefs started to happen, all sorts of social differences emerged, or, different views on race or religion emerged. It caused humanity to lose sight of that initial goal, and it caused either a large-scale catastrophe or a bunch of smaller catastrophes that ultimately sort of weave together. So the idea of God, had not ordered people to perform genocide or any other sin, yet when they broke this God's rule, he started to be seen as a force for further justified violence, for revenge, and subservience to chaos-causing oppression and degradation, because people were, both competing to inflict pain on those that they regarded as different, but they also had, a view that, hey, these groups are the causes of all these mischief. They'd scapegoat this person or this group, And then they would say, well, they're the unique cause of all of our problems because they have different beliefs or different uh, ways of looking. Maybe they dress different, listen to different sorts of music, or in some cases, I mean, look at some cultures, they shun music altogether. And, different cultural expressions that would be perfectly normal in other societies. And when you have all these differences around, well, they become sort of something to fear because you might not understand them, and what you understand you might not like, right? So you might seek out to destroy those other groups, or at least heavily regulate them. And, you have the quest for power that emerges from that cultural narrative. And, you have people who are egocentric and they want to sort of stand atop the social pile, climb that social ladder, and revel in the, I guess you might say, the social splatter of all the bloodshed, like if they are sadistic themselves. So I think there are a lot of little petty justifications for sadism built into, a lot of interpretations of religious teachings and these origin stories. And I think my little origin story is really just an extension of my own beliefs of how these conflicts came to be to a large degree. Like the Bible has some really nice and sort of nefarious passages. Like there's this one I found from Samuel 15:1. It says, "Now go and strike Amalek." Now I don't know what that is because I'm not a big Bible person, but it says, "Go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." So they don't even, this person in this passage doesn't even think you should spare the camels and the donkeys. I mean, what do they do? But it's like the Bible itself makes clear that there are some people who see all of these emerging differences as reasons to basically slaughter others, and the innocent along with the guilty. And boy, why does that sound relevant to today's world? Boy, I have no idea. There are certain groups we cannot criticize, certain governments we are not supposed to call out, and certain, I guess you might say, genocides that we're not supposed to call genocides happening. And I think a good chunk of it has to do with these origin stories and also the remnants of them, because so much of our understanding of the modern world ultimately has roots in prior beliefs. And until we're willing to sort of, I don't know if I would even say look past those beliefs, but expose them and, put them under a microscope, well, I don't think there's a whole lot of progress that can really be made. So there really is something to be said about, doing thought experiments like, trying to create your own origin story experience to better understand, how people might think, and, you might understand how you would think. Like, what if I was to create a religion? What would I have put into it? So that's really all I have to say about this. This ended up being a little bit of a longer episode than I expected. I thought this would be a quick one. But, I guess I had some stuff to say. So have a good day.